Chapter 23. Knocka the Main. Always up to something or planning some kind of devilment, the lads laid plans for weekend rambles, or bartered their books and comics for a tube or tire, or even a jaunt around a field with the Scallies in their reincarnated Volkswagen. That was a real buzz, and was worth a few dandies or beanos as they took the wheel and spun around the high field alongside the Boreen. The brakes were non-existent, of course, but it didn't matter much anyway, as a car quickly ran out of the homemade juice they had converted into a fuel better and cheaper than anything on the market. Its life was short-lived, however, on account of Mulvey and Heward having the franchise on petrol and TVO. They weren't about to lose good money to two young inventors who couldn't change the world, so they copied Henry Ford's motto, "If you can't beat them, buy them out." Sundays were roaming days. A group of boys and girls would gather at the crossroads about midday during the summer to wander through the fields until hunger drove them home late in the evening. A game plan was quickly arrived at with a show of hands. They were gone in minutes, laughing and playing through the fields to the giant's grave or over to Knocka, another of their special haunts. Though a firm favourite, it took some planning, as it was a fair march from the crossroads. A vast estate, it offered unlimited excitement and adventure in the dense copses that grew throughout the huge holding. Numerous outhouses, now mostly semi-derelict, had been occupied until relatively recently by Seamie's extended family before moving to the mainland. As with Balnamanna and Abbeyshrule, Knocka was part of the lands owned by the Cistercians from the Middle Ages until the confiscation and plantation in the late 16th and early 17th century. Kinney of Antley acquired the lands much later, some said in a bet between the bishop and the parson at a rough game of poker one Saturday night. Kenny disputed the ownership, saying his people were granted the lands for siding with the Farrell Bui, but as no one was sure and it was too difficult to prove, they played for it. It was said he won it by plying their reverence with whiskey and getting them to sign it over there and then in front of the young housekeeper. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last, a bit of skirt brought good luck, he was heard to remark in Hanlon's as he ordered fencing for a disputed area flowers of the paddock were trying to get their hands on. They might have gotten it if Flower himself, who had a questionable role as bishop of his flock, hadn't been the subject of a lightning visit from his superiors from Dublin. On finding the latest in radio equipment under the bishop's bed, he was immediately carpeted, but somehow managed to hold on to power despite his lapse to mammon. Heward said he couldn't have luck because he was always stuck in some young one from Legan or Rathone. A long tree-lined laneway led from Conway's to Knocka. Both Johnny and Tommy were excellent carpenters who operated from a well-built barn by the side of their house. If the Sunday came wet and Mass might have to be missed, Johnny piled Nora and the boys into the Beetle. It was a wonder how he was able to set out all with the number of bodies inside. But as he was an ultra-careful driver, there was never any doubt but that he'd get them to the church on time. Huge oak, ash, beech and chestnut lined the driveways on both sides for about a mile. These trees, which lent an air of mystery to Knocka, constantly attracted the young adventurers. However, it was the big oak in front of the semi-derelict mansion itself which drew most attention, as its huge branches hung low to the ground, wandering around like a lost dinosaur looking for its own. It wasn't unusual for the whole gang of youngsters to be on the tree at the same time. looking more like fairies or elves than humans as they flitted from branch to branch. The older and more adventurous sat on the upper branches, acting as lookouts, should any foreigners from a neighbouring parish deign to usurp their haven. From a distance, it looked as if it were a tall ship in full sail, with the crow's nest occupied and the sailors attending to ship duty. One could see for miles from here. The hill of Arva loomed large and boding to the north, where Queen Maeve led her troops into battle against the men of Ulster, led by Cuchulainn. The great Odyssey of the Tyne owed its being to such outposts. Uisneach lay southeast between Athlone and Mullingar, and had a softer, gentler appearance. Quigley often recounted tales of the three sons of Uisneach and the fabled catstone that lay to the south of the hill and was reputed to be the exact centre of Ireland, and the universe as well, as far as his pupils were concerned. Stories were told of a fabulous city which lay deep in the bowels of Uisneach, where the Tuatha De Danann reigned supreme on being condemned to live underground after losing out to the Milesians from the Iberian Peninsula. Croghan Hill, away to the west, was Queen Maeve's headquarters during her long reign, and the other entrance to the underworld thereafter. The lordly Shannon snaked its way through the Midlands, and on a clear day its sinewy shape could be seen from the upper reaches of the Great Oak as it wound its way from Loch Allen to Loch Ree and on to Athlone. The hill of Tara on the plains of Meath could also be seen on a clear day, and in itself the whole exercise was an intriguing lesson in the geography of Ireland, as enunciated by the master himself. A small house and orchard lay at the back of the building, once occupied by Seamie's uncle, also called Séamus, during the early years of his marriage. Later moving to a fine beehive cottage on the hill overlooking the Bost Valley and Tess's River. They were blessed with 4 fine daughters who became an integral part of the close-knit group of Sunday wanderers. Most of the apples in their orchard were cookers and as sour as buttermilk, but wonderful for an apple tart. There were two trees near the gable end of the house with apples as sweet as any that could be got south of Armagh. The young ramblers knew which were which, of course, but games were frequently played out with their younger brothers and sisters, who had to learn quickly to keep up with the rest. Although their steel was tempered in the hot flames of puberty, there was a perceived limit that could be applied to test their resolve. Entrusted with the care of the younger ones, it was imperative they came to no ill, or they'd never hear the end of it if anything untoward happened. This didn't preclude the normal inquisitiveness between boy and girl, or the physical bonds that grew quickly between them. The newcomers were afforded sufficient room to find their own feet, often meaning that they had to endure little stratagems to find their way forward. They soon learned the sweet apples from the sour, and after a few mishaps here and there, they generally settled comfortably into the machinations of the greater group. Considered the owl, Seamie was given a difficult task to prove his worth. He was obliged to go into what was considered the haunted shed and walk along a plank to retrieve a bottle halfway up the barn. A huge rambling building of stone, wood and sheeted iron, it was rarely visited by the kids because it had an evil air attached to it. He didn't see that as a problem at first, but about halfway across the beam, he suddenly began to feel uneasy. A strange feeling came over him as voices resonated around him, none of which he could identify. He felt as if he was being pushed or pulled from the plank. Not daring to look down, he tried to blot it out as he inched towards the bottle. Grabbing it quickly, he launched himself far out onto the hay below. Although covered in sweat, he felt an eerie chill running through his bones. How was he going to describe it to Smiler and the rest of the crew? He didn't have to. His pale face told it all. Sorry, Seamie, that wasn't fair. My brother John wasn't the better of that for days. Mom thought he had the flu, but we couldn't tell her the truth or we'd be killed. Did you hear voices too? I thought they'd pull me off the plank when I was over the machinery and timber. I had a terrible job trying to hold on, but I heard Annabel encouraging me, and that was what kept me going. If it wasn't for that, my goose was cooked. They talked it over before rejoining the group, agreeing it was best to say nothing about it until he had a chat with Tess.